Think high executive compensation contributed to the 2008 financial meltdown? If so, how?
Yeah, I definitely think that high executive compensation contributed to the 2008 financial crisis. Specifically, I remember watching in one of my classes a documentary called Inside Job that discussed pretty much everything about the 2008 panic, especially all the things that banks did that were wrong. One of the main issues that the documentary focuses on was the high salaries and bonuses that top management at these banks were giving themselves. This was my first real exposure to the issue, but I was really surprised when I saw the amount of money that the CEOs and CFOs were paying themselves, despite the fact that their company's performance wasn't so great. Lehman and Bear Stearns went bankrupt, as we all know, and AIG had to get bailed out. A big part of the reason that these financial institutions collapsed was because they had spent so much money paying their top management in the past. They wasted the billions of dollars they would later need in 2008, feeding the rich lifestyles of their upper management who flew in things like private jets and, demanded insane compensations.
Taking into consideration the recent performance of banks, do you believe that their executives are entitled to the high salaries and bonuses they receive?
Yeah, I think it's pretty obvious given the performance of banks, especially if you look at their stock price. Their executives are not entitled to the high salaries and bonuses that they're receiving. I still know that most of the CEOs are continuing to reward themselves with, really high salaries and huge bonuses and big stock options. It almost seems like the banks are lying to themselves. They're in no way earning a big return for their shareholders, but they somehow find a way to justify giving out these commissions to their upper management. I think that's what the whole Occupy Wall Street movement is about, how people have lost their jobs and shareholders have lost all their money, but the top 1% of America is just becoming richer. A lot of people argue that CEOs have worked really hard to get to the positions they're at within their companies and how they deserve to get a lot, but I disagree. I mean, I can see how you might try to justify it like that, but the CEOs in the end are failing at their jobs because they're angering their employees, customers, and shareholders. Performance-wise, then, the upper management at these companies, at these corporations, is not doing well, and I think that was best reflected during the 2008 when the whole financial system came crashing down. So if upper management fails to get the results needed, I think that they should be treated like any other employee and get fired, or at least not get compensated so highly.
Why do you think that these executives continue to get away with rewarding themselves so excessively?
I think that these executives continue to get away with these compensations because a lot of the time they're the one who determine their own salaries and bonuses. When you let top management determine what they should pay themselves, obviously you're going to have a huge conflict of interest. They're not going to view their own performance objectively and will, as a result, compensate themselves beyond what they should actually be receiving. Another main problem in the financial sector is that no one is held accountable for their actions. No financial executive was criminally prosecuted for what occurred in 2008. There are no consequences for, these guys, and, they can pay themselves whatever, as long as they don't commit outright fraud, they can basically do whatever they want. All these executives walked away with millions in stock options after the 2008 crash, and they haven't had to pay anything back. None of the employees in the company speak up about what's happening because they're either also benefiting from the bonuses or they're afraid of losing their job if they go up against top management.
So what do you think our nation government can do differently to help improve the situation and prevent executives from receiving such high compensation?
Well, first of all, the government really needs to do a better job of holding the executives more accountable for their actions. I think the definition of fraud needs to be widened a little to include what the banks did back in the mid-2000s, such as, betting against securities that they were actually issuing. Instead of having congressional hearings when the congressmen get angry at the executives but don't really do anything about it, I think the government needs to actually create consequences for upper management. I personally think many of them should be criminally prosecuted, but even if the government doesn't do that, they should, at least require many of the CEOs to return a portion of their salaries and bonuses that they have received. Also, I think the banks themselves need to undergo some internal reconstructing, and that they shouldn't allow upper management to determine their own compensation. Human resources should be in charge of that, I think, primarily. Finally, I think that the media needs to do a much better job of exposing what's happening. The documentary Inside Job was one of the first pieces of journalism that really revealed the corruption taking place in the financial services industry, but many people still don't know about it unless they've watched the video. Basically, there needs to be more transparency regarding what's happening within the banks in order for the public to understand the issue and demand change.